What's going on, guys? Welcome back to your favorite construction channel. Yes, if you are a new person on this channel, you are very welcome. This channel is basically all about construction and design, okay? And then also all those of you who are returning subscribers, we're happy to have you back, and we hope and believe that you're actually benefiting from this channel. Yeah. Without wasting a lot of time, I'll just go right to the point. So a few weeks back, we posted the house reveal of 4-bedroom bungalow that was, I think, at around 95% completion. Yeah. So we are back here, like we had promised before from the start of the project, that we are going to come and publish to you the costs, every single cost that we've incurred in actually building a particular house. All of you might be in position to actually know how difficult it is for someone to allow you to publish the costs of building their house on the internet, okay? Not anyone would actually want that. So, of course, we had an arrangement with the client, and they allowed us to actually publish the costs that they incurred on building this project. So, you are lucky to have these, and of course, this is really for free for purposes of the video. But of course, the PDF and the Excel versions are going to be available for all those who are actually interested in having these, okay? So before we actually go into discussing the bills of quantities, I would like to first have a few points across. I would like to first mention a few points concerning this project. I will not go back into describing what size of house it is, because it has been on this channel. It has been all over. The plan is available on this channel. Anyone who wants to view it, I can leave the link to the video in the description, so you can see what house it is. But basically, it's a 4-bedroom bungalow, and to it is attached 2 boys' quarters. There is also an outside kitchen that is attached to the boundary wall, and also a store which is currently housing the battery backups. The battery backups for solar and all that. And then there's also another small room that is acting as an external store, okay? So to bring that to context, the house is seated on a plot that is about 14 decimals. If you're to make a conversion, it might be about maybe 65 by 100 feet if you're to convert it into the standard size of a plot, okay? So we are just going to be discussing with you the costs. I would like to put these points across. The first one is that the scope of this work includes everything from the point when construction began to the point when construction was actually completed. Yeah. So I would like also to make it clear that this bills of quantities only involves the materials that were bought particularly for this project, okay? It does not involve anything to do with professional fees or professional charges. So this is for someone who wants to have an idea of how much they would have spent on their house and things like that. So it basically includes building of the house, building of the boundary wall, doing all the paving, putting in the cameras in the house, everything, including even the lighting itself, okay? Including tiles, basically everything that is required of a house to just enter and sleep, basically. It includes even closets and wardrobes, yeah? So the scope of this project is basically to full completion of the project and ready to be habitable, okay? And also along this video, I'm going to be sharing with you tips on what you could have saved on, because like I've always told you before, and like anyone who has built before would understand that the same project or size of a house that someone would build for probably, let's say, 200 million, another one can actually build it for 140, another one can build it for 120, depending on the choices of materials that are picked along the way as the project goes on, of course, after understanding the pros and cons of each of those materials. But then also, I would like to note that in this project, most of the materials that we are choosing were slightly on the high end, not the most expensive, but also not to the standard materials that are available on the market. Yeah, the client was more interested in what is actually good and close to premium, okay? Yeah, so the pricing might look slightly a bit higher than what someone would expect, but it's really within the range of what anyone should expect, anyone who is planning to do a decent construction, okay? So this BAQ is based on actual costs, it's not based on speculation, it's not based on contingencies. Actually, you realize that at the end of the BAQ, there's nothing like miscellaneous, okay? Miscellaneous is for things that are yet to come, But in this, everything that was incurred was actually recorded. If there is anything that wasn't recorded, it probably was very insignificant, probably less than 1% of the total cost. Yeah, because we took the due diligence to record each and everything that was incurred on the project. So brace yourselves and let's head into the video, okay? So to begin with, of course, we are starting with these preliminaries of the site. That includes site clearing / grading. In this scenario, we did not do anything like bringing a grader to the site. The site was generally flat, so we didn't need to bring a grader, but there was matoke. It was like a small plantation, so there was some matoke, there was some cassava and stuff like that. So just getting a few bulls to clear the site and make it ready for construction. Not too much work to do, okay? Then for storage expenses, for most of the times when you're starting a project, you want to have a storehouse where you'll be keeping your cement, because imagine it rains, or maybe the cement you've used for that day, there's still more cement left. Where is it kept, okay? So sometimes we create a storehouse, usually made from iron sheets and stuff like that, iron sheets and poles, where materials can be kept, and also where some of the workers can stay if possible, or where the guard of the site can actually stay. Yeah? But in this scenario, there was an opportunity of getting a smaller house on the site, which cost 100,000 shillings per month, and then 4 months were paid for, of course, and then the total was 400,000. Of course, we paid for 4 months, knowing that by the time we reach 4 months, of course, beyond 4 months, most of the materials will actually be kept in the house because they will have been roofed. So that is why we did not rent the house for long, okay? And then the next one is the construction tools. Those are really pretty much basic. The wheelbarrows, the tank that is going to have the water, to store the water, of course, in case water goes, or when a truck for water comes to deliver water, it needs to put it in a tank so that people can use it in the meantime as we wait for the next delivery of water. Also, you might want to ask yourself what a Y12 is doing in the construction tools, okay? So most of these wheelbarrows that you buy in the market, they usually have a weak body. So sometimes we buy iron bars. You can buy a Y12 iron bar or two to just pass around the wheelbarrow and reinforce it and make it much stronger, because it's about to do very heavy work, okay? Yes, to not spend too much time on that, we go to the actual construction now, okay? So we have the part of setting out, which is pretty much basic. We have building fishing strings, we have poles, we have lime. Lime is basically for marking the points on the ground where the people are supposed to dig their trenches and things like that. We have nails. Roofing nails are for marking the grid points where the walls are going to pass and things like that. So I'll not really spend so much on that. I think it's a bit straightforward, okay? Then we'll go now to the foundation. This is now where the real work actually begins, besides the setting out. So we have concrete works that involves casting of the ground floor slab, and also building the bases for columns in the structure. If you remember well in the design, we had quite a number of pillars. There are those pillars that were at the front. There were also those pillars that are actually holding the tank stand, because in this scenario, we made the tank stand as part of the structure, which is partly a cost-saving strategy and a space-saving strategy if you do not have much space on the ground to have a separate tank stand, okay? And then also we had, of course, those other pillars that were on the parking, things like that. So with this one, this has to do with mainly the main house, okay? So when you see me have this actual construction here, it's actually for the main house, okay? So then we have steelworks, pretty much basic. We have BRC, we have binding wire, we have carpentry works where there's chirundu, there's karitunsi, there's 4x2 pieces of timber for just doing the slab work and things like that. Then masonry, we particularly chose to do clay bricks for the foundation, and they were procured at 420,000 shillings per brick, okay, which brings the total by this time to 27 million, okay. One of the ways that you can actually save costs on this is to avoid very high foundations. Very high foundations cost a lot of money, and they'll even require a ground beam to run through, even if you have a bungalow. If the plinth wall exceeds about 1.2 meters, you might need to run through a plinth beam that is quite costly, where you need iron bars for it, and more concrete for it, and more cement for it. So usually something you can avoid. Then also, you look at plumbing works, you might also be asking yourself, what is plumbing works doing at this part? You see there are four flow traps. We actually used mainly one-way flow traps There are 4-inch PVC pipes, 2-inch bends and all stuff. Usually if you're to see when we are doing our structures, whether it's a bungalow or it's a storage building, for most where the toilet, what I mean is the toilet seater is not exactly attached to an external wall, we provide for plumbing works within the slab, so that when we finished plastering and all that, and even doing our tiling, it will be easy to do the pipe work and also to easily inspect it when need be. Okay, so you see, for balconies we provide for plumbing works, for laundries we provide for plumbing works, bathrooms and all that, and toilets, plumbing works have to be provided for at this stage. Okay, then next is water. The water that we were counting, of course we were using national water that was used. Of course we counted the liters that were used, but in this scenario, because there was no water on the site yet, we were getting them from another meter from a neighbor, so we were counting the liters that have been used and being charged at a particular fee, which brought it to 375,000 shillings. Okay, so basically for the foundation it's already 28 million. Okay, and then to go forward, of course, with that, as you can see, we have now the ground floor. Remember, we've already cast the ground floor slab and it has been left to cure for about 2 to 3 days, and now we go to the ground floor walling. So the ground floor walling, where you see concrete works, basically for things to do mainly with columns, and also the ring beam as well. So all these are combined all together to just break them down into things that someone can easily understand. We usually categorize our construction expenses into these categories, where there's concrete works, there's steel works, there's carpentry works, masonry works, and maybe any others that might be applicable on a particular stage. Okay, so as you can see, I'm not going to spend too much time on it, only to also note that for masonry work we used burnt clay bricks on this project. For those of you who have followed it, you know actually how we used burnt clay bricks instead of hollow blocks. Okay, so that was the 53 million, all up to the wall plate. Then we have roofing, which included also casting of the ceiling. And then if you can see, we used actually the iron tiles, the iron sheets. We used smart bamboo. It's called smart bamboo in the factory. We used Uganda Bati iron sheets, which particularly are called Roman tile because of the corrugations that are actually in the iron sheets. Okay. Then also for this one, you can see we had also other added things like molded timber joists, because the house has a molded eave, so we had to make molded timber joists at the stage of the roofing. Okay, many people would want to cast it with concrete, but that would be much more expensive. Okay, and also if you're planning to save costs on a house, you might want to avoid things like these molded timber joists. Besides costing you, if you calculate the cost that it brings onto the house, basically mainly molds on the window sills and also on the doors and also on the roof, accumulatively they cost you a lot, because in terms of labor and also in terms of materials. Remember, even after we've done it through the ceiling, at the finishing stage it takes a lot of cement, and it also takes a lot of good workmanship, so most likely the labor is going to be slightly more expensive than what you think it should have been. Okay, then I think the roofing is really pretty much straightforward, which everything brought us to 79 million. Of course, this includes those preliminary expenses that we've mentioned and talked about. Yeah. Then for the grand total for the shell, that was about 79 million. Then when we go now to the boundary wall, so remember, when we were building this house, we were building it actually in phases. So we started with the main house. After building the main house and roofing it, then we actually went to the boundary wall. So the boundary wall includes building the boundary wall, also building the external kitchen, which most of you know according to the plan, and also building the pillars for the gate, and also where the gate rail is actually going to pass. Remember, when you're going to put a gate, the rail on which it runs down, there's a ground beam that runs from one end of the column to the other column. Okay, that is on which the gate rail is actually installed, and the gate can easily slide back and forth. So if you don't install that, you might have your gate rail warping when cars run over it and things like that. Yeah. So in this scenario, this includes the boundary wall, just plain building. Also, you might want to note that our boundary wall was quite high. Yeah, if you're to see in the videos, you see that whereas the standard boundary wall might be about maybe 1.8 or 2 meters, this one was much taller than that. For security purposes, yeah, we go to electrical conduit works. So after we had built the boundary wall and also built the main house, we now had to do the conduit works. Those are the conduits that you run through the building before you actually do plastering. So we have those that run through the boundary wall, and we had those that run through the main house and the outside kitchen, and then those that run through the boundary wall. Remember also in this house, all security lights were connected to a photo cell. Most of you, I think, who have been alive for some time might know what photocells are. Photocells are basically those kind of sensors that are put on a building that allow it to detect when it's dark and when natural light is actually on, so that security light, you don't always have to use a switch to turn on security lights on and off. When it gets dark, the lights will automatically go on. When the light comes back during the day, in the early morning, the lights will automatically go off, which is something that also saves costs because you might forget to turn off your security lights. Okay. Then, so we have the conduit works for the main house. Then we have also those for the boundary wall, as you can see. Those, I think, are going to be self-explanatory, as you can see. Then you have the figures there. We'll leave a link for the PDF file and also the Excel file in the description below, okay? But of course, it will be at a small fee, as agreed with the client, for us to be able to share these things on the internet. Then we have plumbing installations, that is for before plastering. Remember, before plastering, mainly the supply pipes have to be run through already. The pipes that are going to supply the kitchen, that are going to supply the toilets, that are going to supply the water heaters, that are going to supply the laundry and things like that, okay? Yes, there you go. That was costing just about 1.5 million. Yes, for the drainage, it's going to include pipes that actually run from that toilet, that are going to take the waste from the toilet, the waste from the sinks, all the wash hand basins, the waste from the kitchens and things like that, and also run underground and take them to distribute them to sock pits, distribute them to manholes, which will eventually distribute them either to the sock pit directly or through to the septic tank, okay? So this is what all that cost, the pipe work and all that for the drainage system. Of course, you can't talk about the drainage system without talking about the manholes, exactly where the pipe work can be inspected from, and also the sock pit, where eventually all the waste goes to, and the septic tank, yeah? I've in videos before, I've shared about the differences between using a normal septic tank and a biodigester septic tank, yeah? So for those reasons, we chose to use a septic tank, a normal septic tank, because actually initially the owner had intended to sell the house, but I think they began to like the house, or maybe something came up and decided no, they would just live in the house. So, but they had put the septic tank option because just in case someone who will live in that house does not know the rules and regulations of how someone is supposed to actually use those plumbing appliances when you're actually using a biodigester septic tank. So they had decided actually to install a normal septic tank, which can be emptied when it gets full, usually about 7 to 15 years, depending on the usage or the number of users. So I have the plumbing works. We built the septic tank using hollow blocks, yeah, and of course we had pillars all around to support the hollow blocks. Also, you might see we also provided some waterproofing for the septic tank because we want to prevent those leakages, water from leaking out, from the septic tank to the remaining of the walls, or when it rains, water does not seep through from the outside to come in and fill the septic tank, which is quite an important point. Okay, then we have steel pre-plastering works. We had timber frames, the mahogany door frames that have to be put there before we actually do the plastering. Now we bought them at 280,000, but it's because they were small. Remember, we used clay bricks and we used them actually in stretcher bond. So if you see, a clay brick itself is just about 10 centimeters wide. So the frame, which is 4 inches, the clay brick is 4 inches, sorry. Then the frame is actually 6 inches. So the extra inches that are provided in the frame are to provide for the plaster work, so that eventually the frame will actually flush with the plaster. If I'm able to make it clear, I hope I have, yeah. So our frames were 6-inch frames, which was slightly cheaper than bigger frames that are 8 inch and 10 inches, okay? But that was it. Then we have the 6-inch nails, of course, therefore helping us to anchor the frames into the walls, so that after you plastered, the frames will be firmly held into the plaster or into the walls even long after the doors have been put. So we also had steel windows, the burglar proofing, and balconies. Now, for many people, okay, for some people, you just go to like a fabrication plant and then you tell them, they come to your site and measure, they fabricate the windows and take them to the site, yeah, which is one way of working. The other way of working is to buy the materials yourself, the metals and all stuff like that, and have them installed, have them put on the site, and make sure that they're actually fabricated on the site, which is actually what we did. Because usually when you just get someone from outside and tell them I want these windows and this, they might quote for metals that are 1.5 millimeters thick and yet actually use 1.2 millimeters thick. So they might they might say they are using 1.2 millimeter metals and they end up using 1 millimeter metals. So sometimes when you have these things on site, it helps you to be able to see where your money is actually going, or to be sure of the quality that is actually being delivered. Yeah. So this includes the steel windows, that is the burglars and all that. We didn't plan to use any aluminium. So we also have the balconies as well, the balcony rails, which is also important. They're also fabricated at that stage before we actually had done the plastering. And after doing all that, of course, we also had a steel gate. I remember the steel gate that we had was a double panel gate. It's a double layer. So there's metal on the inside, there's metal on the outside, which is usually more durable. Then you also have those metals that run across the parking, the carport. And then also we had an extension of the tank stand. Remember, I'm not sure if I've explained before, when we, in this scenario, we made the tank stand as part of the structure, then we added another extension at the top to increase on the pressure of the water. Usually when you make those pillars, the same pillars that came from the ground also run through the roof to hold the tank up, there usually can happen possibly some leakages in the future where the pillar is actually running through the iron sheets, yeah. But in this scenario, we just prefabricated another extension so we can have the tank still be raised enough to provide enough pressure for all the bathrooms and toilets and the kitchen and all that inside, yeah. Then I think that was it. That is basically all for metalworks. Then finally we have the plumbing, the plastering works. So we usually divide plastering into two categories. There's general plastering, then there's molding. General plastering is basically plastering all the walls and making sure they are to plumb, or they are truly vertical and truly horizontal where need be. And then after that, the molding comes in. The molding is when we do those final touches of window sills, putting those cornices where need to be, finishing those edges with where the mortar is actually meeting with the door frames and things like that, to make sure that work is actually neat. So this is where the molding comes in. So now in this scenario, there is plastering and molding for the main house. Those are the materials that were used. Then there's also plastering for the boundary wall. Of course, this includes the boundary wall was not exactly plastered. We did pointing and also created a small coping at the top. If you're able to observe, that coping at the top prevents water from seeping into the blocks. It just gently cleans off the water after a rainfall, okay? Then also it included, of course, also for the outside kitchen, but also importantly, the pillars of the columns were actually plastered, but the walls themselves were not. Sorry, the pillars of the boundary were plastered, but the walls were not plastered, they were pointed, yeah. That is one of the ways that cost can be saved when it comes to doing boundary walls. Then also we have stonework. So we have stonework in several categories. We have stonework for the main house and the gate pillars. Now those were the similar stones, was a similar style of stones, those used on the main house and also those used on the pillars of the the gate. Then also we had stones that were for the boundary wall and also for the boys' quarters. You can see there are those block slates at the foundation of the boundary wall. And then also they are the same that run all the way even to the boys' quarters. But also you might want to know that whenever we're talking about stonework, the stonework goes together with that coping that is just above the stonework, because that coping cannot be done before the stonework. Otherwise it will not look neat or it will not be strong enough. Yeah. Then also down here we have the stonework for the pillars that were on the pillars on the house, and also the pillars on the parking. That was the other stone that we called Mombasa stone. Okay. So basically you can see the figures there. We use cement, and also you can see I used stone slates, and also for the boundary wall we also used some slates. Okay. Then for the paving involves using maram, using stone dust, using pavers themselves, and also the cement itself. Okay, if you're able to see the video, you see the pavers were not the usual, not really the commonest type of pavers. It was a bit of a much better type of paver. Then usually we first put maram and then we compact it, yeah, which is what we actually did. Some people usually ignore maram and they just compact real soil, but problem is that you might have issues of the ground sinking over time, when some part of soil is washed away even while the pavers are on. You find some parts of the compound that are sinking, but when you've done your good maram and compacted it well and still added stone dust and also compacted it well before you can put pavers, you'll have excellent results on that. Okay. Yes. Then you have wiring. Okay. So now after we've done all that, before we even do the painting and all that, we did the wiring. Okay. You can see the quotation for wiring is there. It includes everything that required to have wiring in the house. Also, you might want to note that there's an armored cable here. This armored cable is the one that we pass through the house and also underground all the way to the gate, so that in case the owner wants to put a motor to actually automatically open the gate and automatically close it when you press a remote, so that they don't have to now dig again into the pavers to find where to run the wire to connect it to the main house, yeah, which is also a very important one. Then also we have interior design works. We tried to combine these because these are usually done by the same team. The team that does the cabinets for the kitchen worktops and those kitchen storage that's above the kitchen. Okay, the TV stand, the closets or wardrobes, and also putting in the doors, also as well as the TV stand. Basically all those things together, if you combine them, even the shelves in the laundry room, all those are under here. Okay, these are the things that we are used. Yeah, we use laminated boards. Some people use MDF boards that are usually much cheaper, but they are usually weaker. When they happen to get in contact with water, they begin to swell and things like that. So we went with laminated boards that are more durable. Also, you might want to note that all parts of the closets were actually enclosed. If you're to go in maybe some other rentals, like low-cost rentals, you find that they only do just a timber frame inside and just put doors on the outside so it looks like a closet. But in this scenario, okay, it's always important that your clothes are not in close contact with the walls and stuff like that. So there was plywood run through the whole closet. So when you open the closet, you don't see any walling material at all. Okay, which is also, I think, an important point. Then of course we have hinges, we have screws, we have hollow pipes. Those pipes are the ones that are going to act as hangers for clothes, where the hangers can actually be hooked. What else? I think these are really, really common. Okay, maybe wall panels, those bamboo panels that you see, those wall panels that you see on the TV unit, and also somewhere at the breakfast table, that are to provide some bit of extra beauty, So the total for all that boardwork, wall brackets, stands, paint for cabinets, and silicone for holding them together and things like that, okay, that cost about 14.48 something. Okay, as you can see, the total is keeping on increasing. Then we have marble/granite. In this scenario, we used granite. I don't know if I've explained the difference between granite and marble, but marble is usually not as durable. If you check, marble it's very neat, it looks clean, it looks glossy, it looks very excellent, but sometimes it's easy to stain, and if someone is not good at cleaning well, you find the stains can even last much. If it spends probably 2-3 years without proper cleaning, the stains might actually be permanent. So we went for a very good granite finish, and then that is what we actually had installed on the project. Of course, these all happen with discussions with the client. If the client is aware of the options and the pros and cons of each of the options, they're able to make a selection based on what is actually good for them, or either good for them or good for their pocket. Then also we have painting. Painting has a lot of these. Painting for the main house, and also painting the exterior for the outside kitchen and the boundary wall. So this is basically the exterior painting, okay? No, sorry, this is actually for the interior painting. So we have the undercoat, white cement. These ones are really pretty much straightforward. I think I will not talk so much about them, okay? Then here we have the exterior of the house. We have the outside kitchen and boundary wall. As you can see, we used a texture kind of paint, yeah? So that, it gives that elegant feel, that it's also durable. Texture paste is also durable, though it's not cheap. It's quite expensive, but in most cases it's actually worth it. Then you also have paint for the metals. You can see also you have primer for metals. Some people just want to paint metals directly, but it's important to have them primed, to have primer on them, so that the primer can first react a bit with the metal, so that when you put your next layer of paint, it will actually be durable and you will not experience rusting, okay? Because for some people, you'll find that windows have been painted and maybe 2 years later, not even 2 years, 1 year later, it's already showing signs of rusting, or the paint is peeling off because there was no primer on that, okay? Then also now we have the tiling works. I think it's pretty much straightforward. You've seen the tiles in the house, and these are the things that, this is how much was spent on each particular type of tiles, okay? Of course, some were combinations, but most of it, the bigger the size of the tile, the more expensive it is, as you can see. Actually, we have 40 by 40 tiles being at this scenario, they were 39,000. Okay, this was a Spanish tile, eh? It was a Spanish design, but made by Twyford, which is a Kenyan company. Yeah, so you can see the ones that are bigger, they are more expensive than those that are actually smaller in terms of the size of each piece of tile, okay? Then we have closing, we have mahogany doors, we have hinges, we have screws, we have architraves. Some people usually don't consider architraves, they realize them later. But they used to cover those joints where the mortar actually met the frame, and they give that, that nice feel of a door looking really good and neat, yeah? Then we have glass for the steel windows and doors. Usually some people just come on site and measure and bring glass that's already cut, or you can just go and buy big sheets of glass and they cut them according to the windows that you actually have, like we did in this scenario, because it's materials versus labor. So the materials were separate and they were cut separate, and then they were brought and installed on site. Then also we have installation of network, that is cameras, the intercom system, also the Ethernet system that is supposed to supply the TV and the home office and things like that. Also, there is a battery backup here, but we carried it to the next, we decided to separate the two, so you'll find it at the end of this quotation, okay? So this is basically what was bought. The house had about 10 cameras. Later we added 2 cameras. But in total, there were actually 10 cameras. Then we had the gutter system, which is pretty much straightforward, putting gutters and down pipes and things like that. Then also we had the final electrical installations, where you now come and put in the switches, you put in the sockets, you can see you put in the main consumer unit, you put in the bulbs and the spotlights and all stuff like that, and the photo cells, everything basically towards now the finishing of actually the house. Then also finally we had the power backup, where this house is running on a hybrid solar and hydroelectric power, so that when power goes off, the solar can do that, it can charge the batteries, and also when there is enough sun, the house doesn't have to run exactly on umeme, it can still run on the batteries that are being charged by the solar. So that was another system that was installed towards the end. Of course, the planning has to be there before, so that when you come, you don't start gambling things around. The planning has to be done before, even in the running of conduits and things like that, so that it will make it easy for the solar installation towards the end of the project, or even long after you've lived in the project, yeah? So basically, this is how much was actually spent on the project. Be keen to watch the video of the project, and also be keen also to compare together with this. So the purpose of these BOQs are to give you an idea of if you were to take on a project like this, how much would it cost you? Of course, like I said before, whereas this one cost around 250 million, it could even have cost 200 in terms of materials, or even 190 depending on the choices that you take. Of course, in one way or another, it will be depicted on what the house looks like at the end of the day. Yeah. But it could even have been higher because some people might choose to have more expensive finishes on their projects. Yeah, so this is just for you to be able to maybe to guide you also on things that you need to actually do on your house. Okay, so I hope you guys have had a lot to learn. Let us know in the comment section what you think could have been done better, or what is missing, or let's have a conversation in the comment section and see what more we can do in providing this kind of content. Otherwise, thank you very much for watching and have yourself a good time. My name is DaWinΗ.